Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on the recent trip I made to the North American Media Tour for Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, Stormblood. Myself, a bunch of other broadcasters, YouTubers, and media outlets were invited to try Stormblood early, and we can finally talk about it. Now, I'm going to be releasing a series of videos throughout the day, one on 13 of the different jobs. I unfortunately didn't have enough time to really get any footage for Black Mage or Dragoon. I know the changes and I know the updates, but I feel like there's going to be other people out there who have posted videos on those anyway. I know, for example, Mary wanted to do a really in-depth Samurai video, as well as a really in-depth Red Mage video. Ethis wanted to do an in-depth Dragoon video. I don't know if anyone's doing an in-depth Black Mage one, but to be honest, Yoshi P covered Black Mage in pretty detailed, he gave a pretty detailed explanation on it. Like, I would say that he almost covered everything there was to know about Black Mage, so I don't think it's that bad that I don't have the Black Mage footage. I have about a minute to 2 minutes of all the jobs, plus some extra footage at the end for the healers that I got to run a level 64 dungeon in, so I'll be providing my thoughts on the changes, what my first reactions were to them, and where I see this kind of going in Stormblood. Is this for the better of the game? Is it for the worse? I'll give my thoughts on that in this video. So first I want to talk about the media tour itself. Now, I've never been invited to something like this. I've done events, I've done play sessions and demos and stuff like that, but I've never been invited to like play an expansion early in this nice studio with all the different Kugane type elements, the Far Eastern elements. They treated us to breakfast and lunch. French toast, definitely a solid choice. And it was good. We got to spend a lot of time talking to the different people who were there, talking to each other, discussing the changes that we had seen, you know, changes that we were envisioning, maybe some things we didn't see from the different jobs, things we were surprised to see. And it was just an overall good event. The day I went was only like 12 of us. So it was honestly like the amount of Square Enix like staff that was there was maybe double, maybe even triple the number of people who were there for the purpose of the media tour. So it really felt like a private exclusive event. As for what we actually got to play, well, we had access to all 15 jobs at item level 290. We also had access to a handful of zones. As you can see, Summerford Farms was one of them, but we also had access to Central Thanolin, 2 zones in the expansion, and then Kugane itself. I spent most of my time here in Summerford Farms, mostly because I went to the other zones and I saw the enemies that were out there, and my biggest concern was that they were not max level enemies. So if I was going to show off abilities, it was kind of difficult to try and figure out how jobs played when I was killing enemies that were like, you know, 8 levels lower than myself. And considering we had such limited time, we had only a day, and I think in total, maybe 5.5 to 6 hours of time to, you know, look at everything, figure it out, decide what kind of content we wanted to do. I decided that it was probably best that if I kind of stayed in one place and tried to analyze everything as well as possible to make sure I had as many informative videos that I could put out here as sort of like an information push, since that's what everyone was craving. I could have sat there and focused on 1 or 2 jobs maybe and really gotten into it, but they kept telling us that, you know, these things can change before the expansion comes out, and I feel like I wanted to just get information for Stormblood, because that's what most of you on YouTube have been asking me for, is more information. Not for a solid rotation on the new bard, not for a solid Red Mage rotation, for information. So I focused all my efforts into getting as much of that as possible. I do have some footage from some of the new areas. Like I mentioned, some of the final footage that you're going to see here is from the level 64 dungeon, which I'll talk about a little bit later. We also have the Ruby Sea, just me running around killing a few enemies in the Ruby Sea on a couple of different jobs. Nothing too fantastic. That was like the last thing I had time for. I thought I had an hour and a half longer than I ended up having. So when I got to like just about the end time, I started to freak out, and I only spent a few minutes on, like, I think it was Monk, Ninja, and Samurai. So the footage for those is by far the worst compared to all the other jobs. So that was really my biggest, you know, trouble point, and that's why I couldn't get Black Mage and I couldn't get Dragoon footage. As for the different jobs themselves, I guess we're on healers right now, I think, in the footage, so I'll talk about those first. Healers, Scholar felt like same old Scholar, but with a few more interesting tools. Astro felt like the same old Astro with a few more interesting tools. White Mage is, I'm going to mention it in my job action video, but I'm still really concerned. I honestly think White Mage is going to go through a Warrior-esque remake, going from 4.0 to 4.1, because I get what they're going for with White Mage, this whole pure healer thing. but I just don't feel like what White Mage got is at all what White Mage wants or needs. Maybe when I actually play it at 70, it'll all come together with all the traits, considering I only got to try it in a level 64 dungeon, and so I really only got one new ability, and I couldn't even use my traits to their fullest. I was unimpressed, and I'm going to mention it in my White Mage video when it comes out today. You guys will see exactly what I mean. Moving on to the tanks. The tanks I'm really looking forward to seeing people like Xeno and Layla really break down where the tanks fit in the meta, because we don't know what the fights are going to be like yet. I didn't get to test any raid bosses or anything like that, so I don't know what kind of encounters and like debuffs and stuff we're looking towards. But the tanks were made somewhat more unique than I feel like they were before, or the things that people kind of relate to them were emphasized. A big thing with Paladin is it being a protector. That was, I felt really well done. It has a lot of mitigation, like significantly more mitigation than it feels like the other jobs have. And that's without even considering the cross-class Rampart. I mean, cover is now a defensive cooldown. You still have a hollowed ground. You have the passage of arms. Your blocking now works on magic, which makes Sheltron stronger. You have Bulwark, which is now more useful. Like, everything about them just seemed great. And then you throw on Rampart, and it's just... And then Intervention, like all of this mitigation for the party and for the Paladin seems really valuable. I'm just curious to see if with Path gone on Warrior, if the whole, you know, ravaging, like the conquering your inner soul thing, or the demon inside you, the beast inside you, really fits thematically with them in the raid scene more. Dark Knight, for me, is the one that everyone seems to be most in the dark about, no pun intended. I think Dark Knight is kind of going to be what people claimed Warrior was in Heavensward. I feel like Dark Knight's going to be that berserker force in terms of how much DPS it outputs, because Warrior felt like it had a pretty good balance on everything, some decent self-sustain, it had a pretty clear use for its gauges, you know, it has good mitigation in that of Inner Beast, it has the crazy amounts of damage coming out of the Fell Cleaves and whatnot, but Dark Knight just had so many things that used 50 gauge. It had some good defensive abilities, or it had a good defensive ability, and it had a ton of offensive options. So I think that might be the direction they go. Dark Knight might be that super high damage output off tank, but like I said, I only had very limited time with each of these jobs. So I have a feeling that when people who actually play tanks end up getting into it, will find out that my first thoughts here are quite different. But we also have to remember that things could change by the 16th, so it's highly possible that anything I think now doesn't even apply to that day. Maybe everything's flipped upside down by the time you get the information, and this ends up kind of just being a little bit silly. Then we go over to melee DPS. This is a really big point of contention and interest, because a lot of people saw Ninja, you know, they saw the new crossroll stuff for tanks, they saw that all the DPS were getting that Quelling Strikes equivalent, and there was a bit of concern regarding Ninja's viability in endgame. I have a Ninja video coming out. It's one of the 13 jobs I did get to do a video on. It was one of my favorites to do, actually. I can tell you right now, they still have Shadewalker, they still have Smokescreen. Goad obviously is Crossroll, and Trick Attack, from what I remember, didn't see any nerfs. It was still 10% damage dealt. It was still 10 seconds. It was still sitting on a 60-second cooldown. So I don't know. I don't see much of a big difference. Sneak Attack was gone though, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. Monk felt really good, but Monk really doesn't feel much different than it did before. I'm curious to see if Brotherhood, which is the AoE party buff with the weapon skills giving you chakra stacks, is really going to be enough to make people value them. I think it might, but it's going to be an interesting thing to see play out. Dragoon seems same old, same old. It's still good. It still has Battle Litany. It has another new utility that's kind of awkward to use. I think a lot of people are going to ask them to change one of their new abilities, which I can't really... Oh, you know what? I can't even talk about it in the Dragoon video. I might as well talk about it now. They have a new ability that's called Dragon's Eyes, where basically you give an eye to a nearby ally. So you have the right eye and they have the left eye. You get 10% more damage, and they get 5% more damage. But they have to stay within 6 yalms of you. So if they move too far, you lose the buff. And 6 yalms is, I think that's the distance for like Holmgang's activation. So that is not a very long distance. Yes, if you organize it, it's okay, but I imagine using an ability like that in the Duty Finder, and it wearing off within seconds. Like, I feel like it'd be safer to almost share it with the tank than it would to share it with anyone else, but I mean, that's obviously incorrect. So I think that might see a change before June 16th, because that 6 Yalm thing just, it didn't feel good, it didn't seem that useful, but if you can coordinate it in endgame content, it'll be really, really strong. I mean, it's another 10% for the Dragoon, it's 5% for the person they're connected to, and as long as it's, you know, reasonable, then I don't see why it should be too bad, but it didn't feel good to use. Now, Samurai is a big one. When I actually did my first Samurai video before this embargo fell off, I didn't know there was actually a thread where people had translated a bunch of tooltips, so I was really trying to hold back on the amount of information that I talked about there. But Samurai, for me, feels like the new Monk. Let me explain. So people have been memeing on Monk for a while now, you know, delete Monk, because it has no raid utility, and now it's getting Brotherhood, which is a raid utility, which was something they addressed. Samurai, on the other hand, pretty much has the slashing debuff and nothing else, and whatever they have in the crossroll system. So it's very similar to the way that Monk just had, you know, Mantra and Dragon Kick, which were barely valued, and it's just expected to have its own DPS be the primary source of its utility. Now, the big difference between Samurai and Monk is that Samurai's potencies and their output is insane. Like, it is ridiculous how much damage a well-executed Samurai will likely be able to pull off. They have their own personal attack damage buff in one of their weapon skills. They have a skill speed buff, or an attack speed buff, I should say, in one of their weapon skills. They have the slashing debuff. They have abilities that multiply the amount of damage their weapon skills do. They have a weapon skill that does 720 potency for 3 cents. They have one of the strongest dots in the game, even if it takes 60 seconds to tick. It's insane the amount of single target and AoE damage output that a Samurai actually provides. Is it enough to say they don't need raid utilities? Again, I don't feel confident saying yes or no because I haven't, you know, I'm not someone who had the time to really theory craft a full rotation or anything on Samurai. I can see the basics and I can start to come up with sort of the start of what you might do. But there's no way I could put together like a full-on rotation or priority system, you know, when do you use your sends, when do you sacrifice your sends, how many sends do you build at a given point in the fight? Like, I can get bits and pieces, but I can't put it all together. So that's the job I'm looking at the most, because we harped on Monk for so long for having no raid utility. So if Samurai doesn't have it, we'll see if their damage is high enough. Moving on to the ranged physical, I'm already kind of going on a little bit long. I have a lot of footage here to go through, though, for the background. So for the ranged physical, for Bard and Machinist, these two are the jobs I felt changed the most, but I feel like they changed for the better. I actually had the most fun getting to try and figure out sort of the Bard and Machinist basics. I still didn't really figure them out, but I had a better idea of them by the time I left. And I think that the changes they made to Bard in particular, I'm a big fan of. The Machinist Heat Gauge is fun, but the Bard has so many procs and different abilities and ways that their abilities interact that I found it a little more interesting than the Heat Gauge. But I think that Machinists will welcome the Heat Gauge and will welcome the changes that are coming to Machinists, as well as the things they have available to them in the crossroll. You know, you now don't have to worry about this whole sacrificing DPS thing like you used to have to worry about before. You know, your crossrolls will take care of the utilities that they were taking care of before, and you could just focus on doing you. You know, it was already kind of out the door. They had already lowered Bard's damage reductions in one of the most recent patches. It's what pushed them to being so strong. And with their new damage outputs, with their potencies, with the frequency of the abilities they use, I think that people will find their playstyles to be more pleasant than they were before, to flow a little bit better, and a little bit more unique feeling in a sense. Now, of all the roles in the game that I'm most clueless about, it's probably caster DPS. You know, Black Mage, I've almost never played. I've only ever heard inklings of, you know, the different Fire 4 openers. I even saw somebody, or at least a few posts, I think, talking about a new Black Mage opener just based on what we got out of the live letter. But, I mean, we got pretty much everything out of the live letter. I think there's only one thing that people that know about Black Mage going into the live letter is that those Umbral Hearts also reduce the cost of Flare. So if you have 3 Umbral Hearts, I think it said that Flare, I'm doing it just off memory, so it might be wrong. I'm pretty sure that it said for Umbral Hearts that 1 Umbral Heart reduces the cost of Flare to 1/3 its normal cost. So in theory, well, not in theory, if that's true, then with 3 Umbral Hearts, you could cast 3 Flares back-to-back also for an AoE rotation. So that's another interesting little tidbit. I think that's about the only thing people don't know about Black Mage at this point. I actually learned something about Black Mage, though. Because I've never really played it, I didn't know Fire 4 had a longer cast time than the GCD. I kept saying, why does everyone keep saying triple cast is going to be used in the opener? That doesn't make any sense. Yes, it does, because it saves you an extra 0.5 seconds off those first 3 Fire 4, so yeah, it does actually, you know, end up amounting to a little bit more. At least that's what Black Mage just started telling me on my stream when I started questioning it. I was like, oh, okay. Summoner also didn't really feel like it changed much. I mean, there's things that are different about it. They have some new raid utility. In fact, they have actually some pretty good raid utility to make up for the fact that some of their stuff was moved over into the cross-roll function, especially for healers. But, I mean, I don't feel like they changed too much. I feel like they kept the theme of Summoner going. This new giant demi-behemoth is definitely going to please players, I feel. But I wonder if it just doesn't appear frequently enough. You don't get too many demi-behemoths in a fight, just because of the way that Ether Flow works now and the way that Dreadworm Trance, or the way that Dreadworm Ether works, the resource that actually allows you to summon Behemoth. I'm wondering if that sees any adjustment later, because I don't know how I feel about the damage window. Is all it is. Again, not an experienced summoner player, so you'll have to maybe Hi will make another manifesto. He'll come back and make another summoner manifesto, and he can explain all the intricacies of Demi Behemoth, because I ain't got the patience to put together that many pages of summoner information. That man is doing the Lord's work. And finally, Red Mage. I think Red Mage might have been the easiest job to kind of come to a conclusion about. My footage for it, I still suck at it because I had only been playing it for about 10 minutes, but now I've been sitting on this information for a few weeks, and I've sort of put together the way that all the abilities work. Some of the tooltips, when we read them also, were kind of off. We were told that, you know, tooltips are, you know, a little bit wonky in their translations, and they may not accurately convey what it is they actually do, and I definitely felt like that shone through, because I felt like I understood one of their abilities, and then I realized I didn't know it at all. It wasn't doubling the rate at which I obtained white and black mana. It was just doubling how much I had, even though that's not what it said. So I definitely ran into some issues with that. But it has no dot management, which was really weird to me after all these years of having so much dot management in Final Fantasy XIV. It was just constantly about managing the dual cast, and I felt like it was just pretty straightforward, you know? And I feel like for people, you know, who are into the idea of the Red Mage, the whole dual casting fantasy, it will meet that desire. I'm wondering if it's almost a little too simple. But you know what? Having jobs that are too simple isn't bad in a game. A lot of games have that sort of simpler choice for players who just kind of want to meet a certain fantasy and they don't want it to be a super complicated one. I still think there's going to be some interesting conversations had about the best way to use Embolden, although I have kind of an idea of how it might be used already, at least to its maximum potency. But I think it's a job that was fun, at the very least. Samurai and Red Mage were both incredibly fun. Even when just messing around on them, it was so satisfying to have these abilities and the way that they interacted with each other. It was something familiar. It wasn't something brand new, but it was new enough to the point where it felt refreshing, which is something that an expansion is supposed to feel like. It's supposed to feel refreshing, all this new environment and animations and skills and whatnot. So I was very pleased with Red Mage and Samurai. The cross-roll system I feel like I have to make a video about on its own. Some of the abilities are kind of strange, especially abilities that felt like they were just ripped out of kits and just thrown in there. Like, yes, every healer job had an Asuna, and yes, every healer didn't necessarily always need it, but at the same time, it just kind of sucks to have to cross-roll to get it back. And for White Mage and Paladin, I feel for them the most. They had a ton of abilities that were, you know, you would consider mandatory if given the option to make them available. So I understand why they were put there. But at times, it just doesn't feel good to have to grab some of those skills you already had. And people can already see that there's going to be skills that you take pretty much every time anyway, which was the first and foremost flaw of the cross-class system, which is the reason why people said it would be okay if we just moved away from it and made these things inherent. So I wasn't a super huge fan of it. I like the idea of having different options depending on the different fight. But when you just need to straight up remove abilities from a job, I mean, it technically achieves their goal of cutting button bloat, because now those skills aren't built into your job. You know, you have just those 5 skills from the cross roll, and some of them are replacing abilities that you lost in the process. So technically it does address the button bloat issue. I just don't think it feels good to see an ability you had for 4 years now get thrown into the cross roll system, especially in the case of White Mage and Paladin. I think at this point in the recording, despite like I'm doing some cuts here and there, I think I'm in the middle of the dungeon, even with all the cuts and stuff. This level 64 dungeon wasn't anything too special. I mean, we were also in I-290 gear, synced down, so it's not like it's going to be at the beginning of the expansion where, you know, you're in that 270 gear going in here. I'd imagine that the max item level for this place, I think, is 273, if I'm not mistaken. So it shouldn't be that much harder, but again, challenging new dungeons, they felt was more of the getting used to the combat system. I still think veterans are going to have a fun time coming up with rotations and stuff and min-maxing, even when it comes to the leveling process, like to start to figure things out. But the dungeon itself wasn't that hard. You know, we beat it in 2 tries. We had a few flub ups while they were trying to mess around with Red Mage or with Samurai, but overall it didn't feel too much different from a standard Final Fantasy XIV dungeon. There are some pulls that hit really hard if you do giant pulls, so that much at least was familiar. And that's all I really got to experience. I did get to experience all the different mount speeds, but you guys saw the mount speeds from the recent live letter, and yeah, you saw the fastest one. It feels good to use. I think I'll have some footage separate from this where we actually compare the mount speeds to the way they are before. Like I'll run a route. I believe in the footage that I have of me testing out the new mount speeds, I ran like a straight line from a location, and I'm gonna run a straight line from a location in the game itself, and compare the two. So that's what I'm gonna try to do. We'll see if it ends up working out. But yeah, the media tour was fun. What I got to play was fun. I'm looking forward to a lot of the changes. The thing is, I'm still curious about a lot of things, especially stuff at level 70. Because the only stuff I got to do at level 70 was beat on lower level enemies or hit a training dummy. You know, that's not really content. So I want to see how that actually pans out. I want to see how the new primals pan out. I want to see how Omega Savage and the Super Savage pans out in 4.1. I want to see how this brand new content pans out in 4.2. I want to see how the PvP changes pan out. I didn't even get to look at the PvP hotbars. We couldn't teleport to the Wolves' Den. I think we could have walked over to the Wolves' Den from Summerford Farms, but I don't think any of us thought to do that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe somebody did think to do it. But we had no teleport to the Wolves' Den, so I don't know if we necessarily could have checked out the PvP changes on all the jobs, even if we wanted to. Not that I think anyone was particularly concerned about going all the way to the Wolves' Den when we didn't have a teleport point. So how am I going to do my videos for today? Well, the embargo date's gone, and I have a video on 13 different jobs. I also have some other videos. I haven't recorded them yet, so I don't want to say what they are definitively right here. I mentioned the ground mount speed one, but I have some other ideas, maybe the cross-roll videos as well. And I want to do those as quick as possible. This is information you guys have been waiting for a super long time. I asked my Mondays with Mr. Happy crowd, and they all said spam away. So I'm thinking, as of this recording right now, that every 15 minutes, I'm going to release a video the day of it going, of the embargo going down. So from the moment you see this video, pretty much every 15 minutes, expect to see something else that you can find out more about. But you know what, it's not just about me. This media embargo, or this media event, was a lot of fun. Getting to see a lot of people I haven't seen in a while. We've all been, you know, discussing it, working together behind the scenes, and it's been a great experience, almost a community building experience. So don't forget, a bunch of other people attended. I don't know which media outlets per se, like I don't know like MMORPG.com or IGN or whatnot. But I mean, the people that I knew who were there, you know, we had Miztech, we had Mary, we had Ethis, we had Layla on behalf of Frosty, so Frosty should probably be getting some content out there. We had my friend Brian, who's also known on Twitch as Avalon Star, a bunch of other content creators. We had Resef from Reddit, we had Fusion from Gamer Escape. So it was a fantastic event. I'm glad I got to attend it. I'm glad I got to see all these people and friends who I haven't gotten to see in a really long time. Also, thank you to the Square Enix staff, all the people who work at the North American office for Final Fantasy XIV, some of the PR office people. It's too many names for me. Just everyone who worked at Square Enix, who helped organize the event, and who invited those of us who do stuff on YouTube or Twitch to the event. Thank you so much. You know, we don't get invited to many things when it comes to Square Enix, so having an event like this, it felt really good. And I hope that it's something that we can continue to do in the future. No pressure, though. It's just something that would be fun. There's another expansion 2 years, right? Yeah? Let's do it then. Anyway, I'm going to get to those videos posting. Be on the lookout. And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, State of the Realm. We moved it to Wednesday this week. That's because we're going to be talking about this stuff. We also did a roundtable. Doing a roundtable at 6:30 a.m. PST, so 30 minutes after this posts. We're doing a roundtable with whoever's awake at the time, pretty much, who attended the event. who's on my list. So, yeah, we'll just see. We're just going to be answering questions from the chat, talking about the things that that we experienced, our thoughts on certain things. So if you have any other questions, be sure to stop by the roundtable. If I can, I'll post that to YouTube the next day as well. But anyway, thank you for watching. I will see all of you in the next video. We don't have too much time left before the expansion, so just hold on a little bit longer. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, take care.